I'm Curt Dupriez, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the Actyon K60 from KGM. And some of you are thinking, who? KGM, or KG Mobility, is the new rebranding of the former Ssangyong. Now, from 1988 to 2023, the Ssangyong Motor Company's history reads a bit like a soap opera. I'll spare you the sordid details, but this all-new Korean-sourced Actyon was released by the newly branded KGM back in June. It joins the Ssangyong carryover Musso Ute and Rexton large SUV models, as well as a relative newcomer in the Torres medium SUV that was launched last September. There's also the aging Corando small SUV that, for reasons beyond us, KGM also calls midsize. So, is this any good? Should you shortlist it on your shopping list of medium SUVs? And why has KGM got 2, and possibly 3, midsize SUVs to begin with? That's a lot to unpack, including a funny name, so let's check it out. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
Budget Direct.
Well, according to the Peanut Gallery, I've been saying it wrong. It's actually pronounced Actyon, which is an amalgam of action and young. But if you're after a bit of young action, and you're my age, that's a bit creepy. So I'm going to keep it at action. To say this new Actyon bears little resemblance to the woeful diesel SUV that was put to pasture 10 years ago is an understatement. So with a very clean slate, let's check out its design. Even compared to some of the recent releases that carry over from the Ssangyong badge, this new model is a distinctly different design language. Gone are the strange creases and the concave arches that were on Musso and Rexton, and it's replaced by this neater, more contemporary and plumper look that debuted on the Torres last year. Up front, you get this bluff nose and this very Korean sort of square theme with the front fascia. But the highlight here are these DRL and stacked headlights, which is a bit of a Korean trend at the moment, as well as this lit up grille to give you a strip light effect. These blistered guards and pronounced arch creases really bring a girth to the vehicle stance. And the guards fill out nicely with these 20-inch diamond cut rims that are fit with high quality Michelin rubber. But right around here, the design starts to get a little bit weird. Like, what are these strange handle things on the edge of the bonnet? Are they there so that you can strap the spoils of a successful hunting trip onto the front of your car? Or perhaps they're to tie off the streamers if you want a double duty as a wedding car. But if you do know what they're actually for, please let us know in the comments below. Much more successful is the tapered glass house, which gets this really neat silver slash as part of its design. And it extends through to this neat bobtail spoiler that editor Jez Spinks might be compelled to call Batman's cowl.
Rear spoiler, which is seemingly inspired by Batman's cowl.
But the real win for me is this wraparound glass effect in the tailgate. In fact, it's such a win that it does appear that designers went off to celebrate and forgot to finish off the rest of the taillights. The Actyon looks good, it looks distinctive, while robbing a bit of design language from Europe and Britain while still being distinctly Korean. What it's not is homogenised and generic, which is more than can be said for a lot of newcomers coming into the mid-size SUV segment. It's also not a coupe, no matter how much KGM's marketing department wants to try and sell it as one. The Actyon is 4,740 millimetres long. Meanwhile, its stablemate, the Torres, is 4.7 metres neat. So the difference is only 4 centimetres, or about the depth of the rear bar. The Actyon and Torres both share the same powertrains and platforms, and although the Actyon is actually wider and lower, the Torres gets larger boot space, but more on that later. You see, KGM calls the Actyon a coupe to position it as a more premium offering, even though it's not really a coupe at all. A quick detour on design. Now, convention has it that a coupe is when the roofline slopes from the top of the B-pillar. 2, 3, 5 doors, it doesn't really matter. Coupe is all about what the silhouette does in the profile. When the roofline drops from the top of the C-pillar, you get a sedan, a liftback, or a notchback. And, window or not, when the roofline drops from the D-pillar, you either have a wagon or a conventional SUV. And another part of the premium positioning is the price. So the very similarly sized Torres kicks off at $35,700 and tops out at $44.5 grand. But the Actyon kicks off at $44.5 grand and tops out at $47.5 for this, the K60 flagship, or 50 grand neat driveaway. So that's proper mid-sized money and a fairly bullish price tag at that. No surprises then that it comes with a long list of features, and most of those can be found on the inside. So that's where we're going to head next. Dual 12.3-inch screens, check. Fancy multicolored mood lighting, Check. Hexagonal steering wheel that's trendy and OSO 2025? Check. Brooding Euro vibe with more textural materials than you can poke 5 sticks at, including fake wood trim and carbon fibre? Quadruple check. It all presents pretty well with an innate sense of maturity and a fair amount of slickness. Particularly the neat wraparound horizon line that separates the dash fascia from the rest of the interior trim. But where it's really trying to stake its claim as decent value for money is in areas such as the seats. Both front seats are 8-way electric with 2-way lumbar adjustment for the driver, and they're both ventilated up front with heating, and you get heating as well on the rear outboard seats. But in a segment full of offerings of faux leather vinyl trim, the Actyon actually brings proper genuine Napa leather, complete with diamond pattern and red stitching. And that's pretty good at this price point. It's complemented by soft touch suede on the doors, which also gets red stitching, though I very much doubt that's the real stuff. Even Porsche uses fake suede on its cars. And although the combination of piano black, fake carbon fibre and fake wood trim is a bit questionable, it does inject a sense of occasion. Even better yet, it feels really solidly put together, which is more than can be said for a lot of premium SUVs that we've driven lately that want for a lot more money. But it's not all gushing plaudits. Now the instruments look nice and crisp and clear, but there's not a lot of song and dance when it comes to the content. It's not really all that configurable, and while the skins do change between normal and sport modes, the differences are very, very subtle. The media system too also looks clean and simple, although its response times are very, very slow. So it's slow to boot up at startup, and it's slow to respond when you start going through the apps. And the content is a bit of a mixed bag. If you stump off for the K60 flagship, you do get rather fantastic 360-degree camera system. However, surprisingly, there's no proprietary sat-nav. You have to use your phone. And when you do use your phone, there's no wireless CarPlay or Android Auto. You do have to plug it in using a cable. More annoying is that most of the features are buried in the touchscreen. So if you want to go from the climate control to drive modes and then from drive modes to audio control, it is a very distracting chore. Thankfully, you can set up shortcuts with a star button on the steering wheel for some of your favourite features. And there's a neat little swipe down feature for shortcuts for some of the controls. Nor are these Napa leather seats class leading. They're actually quite short in the base and they don't really have an awful lot of bolstering, so you can be thrown around a bit when you're going through corners. There is plenty of storage in and around the floating centre console. So you get a neat little angled inductive charge pad, a couple of cup holders, a neat stubby little crystal-like transmission controller, a couple of USB ports, and there's enough room in the door bins for 1.5 litre bottles. Right, let's check out row 2. It's reasonably roomy here in the second row, and the top spec version's panoramic glass roof does add a bit of airiness here and adds to the sense of space. Another good thing too is that the front seats are set quite low, so visibility out the front is actually very good. The dual zone climate control system also adds some rear vents in the rear, and you do get 2 USB-Cs that mirror the 2 up front. So in terms of essentials, it's got all its bases covered. You do get manual blinds for the windows of the rear doors, which, like the fronts, are a smorgasbord of different materials, but the sense of occasion does extend from the front through to the rear. Then you get these really strange handles here on the back of the front headrest. Now, we initially thought that they might be for holding iPads and that kind of stuff, but apparently it's just so you can hang your jacket. You also get a bit of a party trick that's been stolen by other Korean manufacturers, and that you get front seat adjusters in the sides of the front seats, so rear passengers can adjust them. Now, this might seem like a good idea until the first time you do chuck mischievous kids or adults in the back seat, and they'll mess about with the front occupants. And then there's the so-called sleep mode, which as far as I can tell, just means that you can recline the seats back for when you want to have a bit of a snooze. But the seat backs have to be upright for maximum boot space, and that's what we'll check out next. You get a kick sensor as part of the features swag for the powered tailgate, which does open to reveal 668 litres, which is 35 litres down on the Torres. Drop the rear seats and you can liberate up to 1,568 litres, and you do get a space saver spare under the floor, which is going to be handy for when you hit the road, and that's where we're heading next. Where the action starts to seem a bit lukewarm is in the powertrain format. This K60 fits a 1.5 litre turbo petrol 4 that's backed by a 6-speed conventional automatic, and it exclusively drives the front wheels, and it's the only powertrain that's offered in Australia. Not that it necessarily lacks herbs. Now, power's only 120 kilowatts, but it's backed by 280 newton meters. And that's enough to get those front wheels spinning up enthusiastically when you give it a bootful out of a corner or you're trying to exit in a fast moving traffic. So there's enough energy to really get 1,650 kilos of SUV moving pretty briskly around town. At least that is one up, without loved ones or luggage aboard. In private testing here on our track, you can call it 9 seconds neat for the 0 to 100 km/h sprint. It's just that the hard boosted little turbo petrol engine is a little hard up if you're doing anything other than driving Miss Daisy. Now, if you trounce the throttle from a standstill or at low speed, there's a torque spike that does try and overcome front wheel traction. But those quality Michelin tyres do manage to harness plenty of traction in most conditions. But on the move, that engine just really lacks much mid-range muscle, particularly in times when you're trying to merge into traffic or overtake. And then there's throttle response, and a lot of times this powertrain can get caught snoozing. So you get this strange concertina where there's this throttle lag and then the engine wants to spike up in a wheel spin, and that alone does get pretty tiresome. But probably the biggest pain on road is the transmission selector. Now, anytime you want to go from drive to reverse, it requires 2 flicks of the little toggle switch, or you need to hold it down for a long moment. Get it wrong and you will get a box full of neutrals. At best, it's annoying. At worst, it's almost dangerous, particularly if you're trying to do a 3-point turn and you're trying to get out of a dangerous situation. Would you get used to this action after a decent amount of ownership? Perhaps, but would I want to hand this to my eldest daughter or my mum to take it for a spin down in the shops? Not a chance. Better well executed is the ride and handling balance. Now, it's definitely less flaccid and more composed than some of those spongy SUV newcomers that are coming onto the market. But across big undulations and things like speed humps, the compression is nicely judged and the rebound is very well controlled. However, those big 20-inch wheels can tend to slap and fizz a little bit over the small undulations and some harder edge hits. But overall, it's a pretty resolved ride and handling balance. On handling, it is confidence inspiring and fairly sure-footed. To a point, when you do push on, it does start to get a little bit ragged. Steering too is fine enough. Now, the front end points pretty well, but it is a little bit woolly around the center, and it'll be fine for most buyers' tastes. Speaking of feedback, one of the pleasant surprises is just how well calibrated the driver assistance and safety features are in this car. The action is quite quiet and unobtrusive, and part of that reason is there's no annoying bleating driver monitoring system or any overspeed warnings. I've only really seen the forward collision proximity sensor go off and some of the active lane keeping software trigger over the last week, and both in situations where it actually really warranted it. Nice work, KGM. So definitely nothing to complain about there. But one of the big shortcomings of this car and the on-road experience is the fuel economy, which brings us neatly to running costs. Because the little 1.5 litre boosted turbo engine works so hard for its keep, it really struggles to get anywhere near its 7.6 litre combined claim. In fact, if you're mostly driving around town, it's going to be the high 9s, and it regularly dips up into double figures. In terms of fuel grade, well, KGM doesn't really say on the form guide. However, inside the flap, it does say it will run on E10. Servicing, well, a 5-year plan is going to cost you $1,898, which is about $500 more than a RAV4, and the intervals are 12 months or 15,000 kilometres. Warranty is also a fairly typical 7 years of unlimited kilometre coverage. The new Actyon is a big step in many good directions for the former Ssangyong. The flagship K60 is loaded with features and lays on a lot of luxury items that are hard to find in other SUVs around the 50k drive-away mark. It's underpinned by a chassis that's downright decent, and its safety systems are better calibrated than so many other mid-sized SUVs out there, including many of its Korean contemporaries. But at 50k drive-away, the Actyon plays directly against popular sellers such as Toyota's RAV4, Mazda's CX-5, Hyundai Tucson, and Mitsubishi Outlander. And while none of those competitors are really going to be flagships, what you do get in its rivals are the choice of all-wheel drive and electrified hybrid powertrains. And that's before you even take into consideration some very well-specced and very sharply priced Chinese competitors from the likes of BYD and MG. Perhaps you might be swayed by the looks and the leather from a challenger brand that has rebranded itself twice in the last 12 months in Australia. But we can only really recommend this Actyon once its ducks are all lined up. And for the sort of money that I asked for, the Actyon really shouldn't come up short in key areas such as powertrain and fuel economy, and in smaller areas such as the lack of a sat-nav system or the absence of wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So we do look forward to the future of action, where we hope that they can fix some of the misses and add a proper hybrid powertrain. So that's what I think, but how about you? Put your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe while you're at it, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.